Good afternoon and welcome to this latest session at the Green Horizon Summit here at COP26. I'm Michael Moore, I'm the Director General of the British Private Equity and Venture Capital Association, and we are delighted as an association to be partners with the City of London Corporation and the Green Finance Institute at this summit, joining thousands of others on the River Clyde here in Glasgow to address one of the biggest issues of our age, how we tackle climate change. Today's Green Horizons Summit has already covered a lot of ground, as the last couple of sessions have just brought to life brilliantly. Our purpose in the next few minutes is to shine a light on how venture capital in particular can help all of us to address our climate change challenges and, of course, the opportunities. Our panel today, who are going to help me do this, are much experienced in lots of different areas. Simon Hombersley is a tech entrepreneur on a mission as CEO of Xampla to replace the everyday single-use plastics, which are, of course, all around us. His business is backed by Horizon Ventures, amongst others, and we'll hear more about that shortly. Sarah Ellerby is CEO of Pangaea, and she's bringing transformation to another area. Her clean tech business, with a world-first technology, turns sustainable plant biomass into a variety of valuable biochemicals and biofuels. Her business is backed by Power Equity, amongst others. Stephen Mandel completes our panel, joining us remotely. Stephen is a principal at TPG Global and a member of the climate investing team there. Of course, the RISE Fund invests in companies driving lots of different things, measurable social and environmental impact alongside good business performance and strong returns. And Stephen will bring a welcome investor perspective to our conversation today. Now, we've heard a lot from different parts of financial services and the capital markets. In terms of private capital across the UK, judging from our membership here at the BVCA, there are businesses that employ over 1 million people, 5,000 of those businesses, 90% of which are actually SMEs. They're in all parts of the country, importantly 2/3 of them outside London, and they invest in a whole range of sectors. We like to think they can reach bits of the economy that sometimes other forms of capital struggle to reach. And like everybody else who's contributing here today, very committed to net zero and doing our bit both through investment, making the right commitments and ensuring we have appropriate stewardship of the assets that are part of the portfolio of private capital across the UK. The key people who make all this transformation possible are well represented here on the panel today. I gave a little brief intro, Sarah, to what you and your business do, but just help people understand the transformational impact that you hope to make with your business.
Michael, thank you. So Pangaea Technologies has developed a process technology that converts biomass such as woody and agricultural plant residues into sustainable sugars and biochar. The sugars can then be converted to advanced fuels such as bioethanol and sustainable aviation fuel. The biochar can be used to decarbonise the steel industry to create green steel. It can also be used as a carbon capture when used as a soil enhancer, and this part of our process is considered carbon negative. The process itself is quite rapid, it's continuous, it only takes seconds and minutes to process. We have a pre-commercial plant at Wilton International. We're looking to scale out that plant next year into commercial production. We're also partnered with British Airways and LanzaJet to deliver 130 million litres of sustainable aviation fuel to decarbonise the transportation, specifically the aviation sector, next year.
Sarah, those are eye-catching ambitions and numbers. Simon, what's your version of the transformation that you're hoping to bring?
We are seeking to replace plastic. over the next 20 years or so, there's going to be a major transition away from synthetic materials, and our focus is on single-use plastics and microplastics in particular. And our launch product is actually, I have a sample for you right here, dishwasher tablets. So these are everyday dishwasher tablet wrappers that you might use at home. When you dissolve those in your dishwasher, you're actually contributing to microplastic pollution. So we've developed a range of soluble and indeed edible films that we launched last week as a solution for plastic, where you can actually eat your own packaging, or when you dissolve it into the oceans, it goes away and causes no harm. And it's worth bearing in mind, 855 billion single-use plastic sachets are produced on this planet every year.
Wow.
It's an inconceivable number.
I'm so glad you're not asking us to eat the wrapper.
I'm not eating the dishwasher,
but
no.
you've certainly caught our imagination there. Stephen, I guess your privilege is to see businesses like this day and daily coming and looking for investment, or thanks to the investment you're providing, actually getting on to scale and ensure they can do the transformation that this whole COP agenda requires of us. Let us understand a little bit about your role and what TPG and the RISE Fund are looking for from COP.
Sure. So TPG RISE Climate is the climate investing strategy of TPG's broader impact investing platform, TPG RISE. As you noted, we were really pleased to announce the first closing of the RISE Climate Fund at $5.4 billion in July of this year, and appreciate the partnership from our global investor base to target our hard cap of $7 billion by the end of 2021. What we're really doing at TPG RISE Climate is trying to scale the climate leaders of tomorrow. And we do that by sort of looking at companies that we categorize in sort of 5 key buckets. The first being clean energy, the second being decarbonized transport, third, greening industrials, fourth, agriculture and natural solutions, and the fifth being enabling solutions. So a lot of what we do goes beyond just what's being discussed at the panel today, but also what is being discussed by Sarah and Simon more broadly are things that we look at and see across our desk on a daily basis.
And in terms of the scale of that fund, I mean, that again is another big number to add to the ones that we already had from Simon and Sarah. Was that above expectations? Is this a sign of a growing area of interest from investors?
I think broadly, and everyone being at COP26 is a testament to the initiative that we all are here to achieve net zero and avoid carbon emissions more broadly around the world. We really support the work of everybody in the investment ecosystem and more broadly across the community. So I'd say we as TPG are here to back the companies of tomorrow and see a lot of value in early stage investors as well, whether it be venture capital, grants, governments, and the likes.
Okay. So, Simon, in terms of your experience of venture capital, how important is this form of capital to your business as you've grown in the early stages, and where do you expect it to take you going forward?
Venture capital is absolutely critical to a business like us. So our first employee was in January last year, and we're up to 25 people now. We've raised 8.4 million, a couple of million more in grants and customer funding, and we're now launching our first products and we're signing our first deals. All of that is venture funded. All of that has happened because of the backing we've had from Amadeus Capital Partners initially, but then following on from Horizons Ventures out of Hong Kong.
And Sarah, yours is a way more capital-intensive business, if I understand it correctly. Probably the check sizes need to be multiples of other areas. Has that been a challenge?
It has. We've to date we've raised just over 11 million in equity finance from individuals as well as angel networks such as Cambridge Angels, all the way to Par Equity and the Northern Powerhouse Investment Fund as well as Future Fund. But we are a capital intensive business, and the next phase of our evolution really is going to require a lot more capital, because we are looking to scale out and move into commercial production next year. So that will require obviously a larger mandate of capital. We have just raised 2.4 million, but from existing shareholders, we were unable to attract external investment from the VC community, and are actually looking at raising capital over in the US, where we believe that the risk aversion isn't there as much as what we're seeing in the UK.
And Stephen, you are based in the UK at the moment, heading back to the States. The fund is global in its perspective. How do you relate to the stories you're hearing there from Sarah and Simon?
Sure. Well, I think it's really exciting what Sarah and Simon are doing. It's really in TPG's firm DNA to invest in growth equity. And we see both the earlier and later stages of this growth equity. And we also see, as I mentioned before, the value in earlier stage venture capital and potentially the need for angel investors and even government grants. But from where we sit as TPG Rise Climate, we're looking to sort of really help companies grow when they're ready to scale.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of what you offer, clearly the check is a big attraction, and that's the starting point. But how engaged are you? How involved are you with the business? How do you help them develop sustainably, regardless of where their primary market focus might be?
Sure. Well, as investors, our focus is to be more than just capital providers. TPG has been around since 1992 and has a network around the globe. And we try to help the companies that we back benefit not just from the capital you provide them, but with the network we bring, and having been experienced investors in the space for many, many years. And we think that brings more benefit to the companies we partner with in the long run.
So, Sarah, one of the critical things here in our industry is not just about it's providing the capital, but also the idea that you get experienced people sitting alongside you as the senior management team and helping you develop the business that way. Now, you've got a background in senior corporate positions in America and the UK. How does the relationship work when you've got venture or angel finance sitting on the board and not just thinking where's the money, but how do I make this business grow?
I think that it's an evolution really of scale up. We're in that phase of perhaps passing the baton to a strategic or institutional investor. We're also looking at a potential IPO. So there is an evolution for these types of companies, and we're at sort of an inflection point where we will require perhaps a lot more capital than our existing investors can basically syndicate at this level. But it is important for earlier stage companies, perhaps with less experience. I have over 20 years experience. My team is very experienced for this stage of business. But for founders and for companies that want to scale up, that relationship with the VC is quite an intimate relationship, and there's a lot of value that they add to the business. They're there as a sounding board. They're there to add skills, expertise, open up their networks, of course, for the next round of funding. So it is an evolution, and for Nova Pangaea, we are at that inflection point where we will require, a substantial amount of capital. We'll need to look outside of our existing shareholders.
Is that echoes of that in your experience, Simon?
Absolutely, and it's a relationship that when you're talking to investors at whatever stage you're at, you have to think, I could be with this person for 5 years, 7 years, maybe 10. These are deep tech businesses, time to go all the way through. So you do need to be comfortable with your investors, and Xampla, we're very fortunate that we've got a good deep tech aligned investor base, but this is my fourth spin out. I will say that in the past sometimes that hasn't always been the case, and you find yourself pulling in different directions, and that can be a challenge. So you do need to get your investors right, as well as the investors needing to get their investments right.
Let me take a bit of a risk with this next question, if I may. I mean, we're excited to talk about transformation. The moment here is about ensuring that collectively as society we transform, but that is attached to the word transformation is risk.
Yeah.
And this is quite a difficult area to get your head around sometimes. Do we have the skill set in the investor community? How do we share that? How do we grow so that we can make the right assessments for investing in your types of business?
I think there's an attitude that underpins a lot of this, which I think is evolving in the UK much, much more than it has been in the past, which is failure happens. And about that or ashamed about that. Things go wrong. Now, what we are seeking to do generally in tech businesses, but specifically in this sustainability space, is an entire generational shift. These are some mega trends. What the guys over at COP26 are talking about right now is going to affect the next century of our lives. So this is an enormous change, and things are going to go wrong in that. Not every horse that our investment community backs is going to win this race. So people have to accept that and engineer their thought process into accepting risk.
Absolutely.
It's really not an option, is what Simon say.
Yeah, no, there isn't. There's going to be a lot of risk. You know, we're at sort of a pinnacle point where we do need action, and a part of that is deploying capital to these earlier stage businesses and trying to mitigate risk. Perhaps it's through joint venture, perhaps it's, you know, again, it's the public, it's the public sector, private sector coming together to mitigate risks through legislation, through incentives, through policy, and it's all required. This is a massive transformation, and it goes beyond the UK.
But it is also opportunity, and I think we sometimes forget that because we read so much about the challenges in this space and the sort of problems. Most of us are in this because we want to make the world a better place, and we're the UK's first spin out to become a certified B Corp. So we are mission-led, we balance profit and purpose, and I see no inconsistency of that at all. Solving these problems is going to make my investors a lot of money, and that's how we need to think about this space as well.
That's a beautiful setup for you, Stephen, because I guess that's a shorthand for what the RISE Fund have been doing with it over a number of years.
No, that's correct. Listen, what we like to do is help facilitate action, right? There's many people talking about things to do, but it's ultimately these companies of tomorrow that enable all of us to be able to ultimately achieve our objectives, and we as investors are here to help facilitate action to that calling. I would just echo as what I said before is there is risk when you make investments, and there's different types of investor bases depending the journey that every company is in. And so where we sit at TPG Rise Climate, we definitely are strong supporters of companies that investors that sort of get into companies at an early stage, because in many instances, the point where we come to scale is at the end of the journey of earlier stage investors, to the point where the companies have maybe gone through their riskiest journey to the point where they're now ready to take that leap to grow into a much larger climate company of tomorrow.
And is it just about climate, or will we see a broader range of societal transformations, you know, on beyond what we're thinking about this fortnight here in Glasgow? You know, where else are there exciting opportunities?
Sure. Well, as a reminder, the TPG Rise Climate is an extension of TPG's Rise Fund, which is an impact investing platform. So that impact investing platform is focused also on the E part in terms of climate, but also the social and governance element of it as well. So we at TPG have been started the Rise Fund to be broader impact investors, but more specifically with our Rise Climate strategy are focused on this specific element to tackle climate change.
And when you're looking at this, I mean, there are two or three different areas that spur in businesses to change. It can be that regulation or lawmakers are requiring change of businesses, and that might be one of the outcomes from this great summit in Glasgow. There's the issue of investors like you driving a particular direction, or there's the consumers. I mean, increasingly, do you think, is it you, the investor, that is driving? Think consumers or lawmakers are helping you get the right frame of mind to create the place where the businesses like Sarah's and Simon's can develop?
I think it's a combination of all the above. You need the consumer and the population, and we see that now where people are wanting to have products and live in a world that is more climate conscious. We see governments joining together like we see at COP26, trying to align policies to enable greater action. And then there's investors like us that are here to back those companies of tomorrow, because there is that customer pull out there who says we want to get behind this initiative with the support, hopefully, from the government as well.
And so back at the kind of front end of where these decisions are being taken, it sounds very exciting, Sarah, that how much you might do on aviation, but how radically does everything have to change to get to a point where there's maybe a tipping point in the industry, the requirement? Is that driven by regulation, or will it be driven by consumers saying, I'm not sure that we can keep going with aviation the way it is? I
think it's a bit of both. But I think in order to deliver on this aspirational net zero, what's critical is, for Nova Pangaea, we are part of delivering on that circular bioeconomy. And in order to do that, we've got to be able to accelerate the funding into these earlier stage companies. We can't do that without funding. And so, net zero is fantastic to have that aspirational target, but in order to do that, you've got to be able to accelerate and scale quickly. And we can't do it next year, we can't do it a year after, we have to do it now. And we've got to start to invest and look at risk and manage risk differently.
So earlier on, Simon, you were showing us the dishwasher tablet. We can all relate to that and the frustrations of thinking, what is all this doing to the environment? Again, in terms of thinking about who's driving that, you've obviously seen a great business opportunity in that particular area. Is that consumers that have opened that up for you, or are you trying to push to get people to change their mindset and then come back to you and go, oh, yeah, I need that for my daily life?
I think, fortunately, Xampla's riding a wave here of significant consumer regulatory and other drivers. So nobody wants to maintain plastic in the way it is being today. So we're not needing to change any consumer behavior. But I think everything comes back to people in the end, and the politicians at COP26 are responding to their voters. We are responding to our customers, essentially. We're a B2B, but the consumers ultimately drive this. And this is not a trend that's going away here. Ultimately, the consumers want this problem to go away. And that's not just in plastic, that's across the whole range of different areas. And all these areas are also interrelated. When you're talking about cracking plastic, you're also talking about a massive shift in land use, which is related to the decline of meat, which then might be related to a whole bunch of other factors. So it is all connected, which is why it does come back to politicians to provide leadership, even if consumers are the ones who are pushing.
He's very good at providing the segues, this guy. Stephen, if I might just take that baton and come back to you in terms of, here we are, the lights are going down in Glasgow, it's the winter evening, we've got all the serious politicians of the world, pretty well anyway, gathered. What do they need to produce? How relevant is what they're talking about to what you're going to be doing 2 weeks on Monday after the caravan has moved on?
Well, we support the work that they're doing here at COP26, and there's been a lot of work that's been done by many others before this event took place. But I think for us, what we ultimately are hoping for is it helps facilitate action, because where we sit as investors, we want to be able to get behind the companies tomorrow, go into action, and not just and the way we do that is by having more aligned policies from border to border. We're global investors. And so the more harmony there is across borders, the more we're able to facilitate capital across the globe to back the companies of tomorrow. What I'd also add is beyond the governments, I think corporates are also getting involved as well. We talk about the customers, we talk around governments, but one thing that is unique, I think, as well, is you see that the corporations of today, the leading corporations getting behind initiatives as well. And that's something that we also saw with the Rise Climate, where we had participation from large corporates as part of our fund, which I think demonstrates their commitment to the broader initiative as well to take action.
So, Sarah, from your perspective, I appreciate that there's not much time when you're running a business and trying to develop it to spend much time on politics or anything else, but our minds are focused on this great moment. What are you hoping for from the world leaders and the legions of others who want to get something positive out of Glasgow?
I think action as well as support for, it's really a coming together, public and private sector. We've got to act on this. This isn't something that, we can just talk about with no action. We've got to act on it. I hope that we can get the right policy framework and the right incentives to support businesses and to obviously reduce some of the investment risk at this stage of our business. And so, really stability, a lot of consistency we've talked about across the board. But again, it comes back to action, and it comes back to the acceleration of funding for some of these technologies.
It might be a slightly unfair thing to put to you, but I mean, one of the transformational things in this respect might be a more serious approach to a carbon tax and so on. That might help you, but for reasons that are probably fairly obvious to all of us as citizens, quite difficult for politicians to deliver. Do you fear that's one of a range of issues we might not make progress on?
It is a concern because that would fix a lot of problems. Carbon tax would be a very simple way to fix these problems and move away from that, really just reduce the dependency on fossil-based products. So, it'd be interesting to see what the outcome of COP26 is. I think we're all hopeful that things will change and that there's a transformation and a coming together of not only countries but also the public and private sector.
I'll come back to each of you for a one-liner finishing thing in a moment about if there was one thing that was to be achieved here, what would it be? But Simon, in terms of the action is the theme that we've had from Stephen and Sarah, what kind of action do you think will say Glasgow as a success?
I think it's leadership, isn't it? I think the outcome from this conference is going to be complicated, and that's inevitably what it is. But if the message that comes away is that these world leaders are prepared to act on a global level to solve these problems together, then we'll make some progress. And for a business like us, Xampla is replacing plastic. This is an enormous market and an enormous globalized business with massive economies of scale. The solution is going to be at the global level. We can't have 10 different national territories having different standards or different regulations and so forth. What we need is consistency and ambition. Global leaders need to recognize that this is not, obviously it's not small, but even when you break it down into our individual businesses and our individual sectors, the solutions are simply not small, they're huge. So we need some big thinking and some consistency.
I'm going to take that as your
that is my
one thing that you would like. Sarah, what's never mind anything else, one thing that will say this as a success?
Collaborate globally, come together globally, and accelerate, obviously, funding in these technologies that are ultimately going to enable decarbonisation as well as reaching net zero.
I think Sarah might have snuck in 2 or 3 things on one thing that she'd like success. So, Stephen, what would you add to that list from your perspective?
Oh, well, that's a good list. I think I may just echo a lot what Sarah and Simon said around alignment of initiatives across borders to help facilitate the scale of companies that don't just operate within one border. And the point we all were just hammering down with is action, because I think outside of this conference, and it's great everyone is getting together, but the most important thing we look to is people to act on what we discuss.
That's a bold and good way to call us all to arms. And just from my perspective, looking across the UK's private equity and venture capital industry, private capital has a lot to contribute. The know-how as well as the capital, as we were discussing earlier on. But also, I like the idea of, essentially, we need to shift our mindsets, don't we? Collectively, and make sure that whichever perspective, we don't just expect the politicians to deliver everything, we've got a big role to play there as well. So no doubt over the next remaining sessions in this particular bit of the summit, there will be some more exploration of those themes, but for venture capital, for private equity, for the great opportunities that we've heard from our panellists today, I think we can be quite excited about what the future holds. So long as those folk on the other side of the Clyde really deliver, then we know what we can do to add to that. Our thanks to all here at the summit for allowing us to be part of this, and we look forward to the ongoing debate.